Again, thank you, everybody. Welcome, Lekshi. You can begin whenever you're ready.
Okay, share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, so thank you all for joining this evening. What we're gonna cover is Hanblecia. Hanblecia, one of the 7 sacred sites, sacred ceremonies, one of the sacred ceremonies of the Lakota, Oglala Lakota people. Many different other tribes utilize Hanblecia. When you break the word down, Hanblecia comes from the word ihumble and chea. So the translation, the closest we could get is like crying for a dream. So we see here the picture of the famous holy man, Nicholas Black Elk. And so those of you that have read the book of his, Black Elk Speaks, he took sick when he was 12 years old, and he was given a vision. And in his vision, he was taken all over the universe and given powers from the 6 directions. He became a holy man, and as you read, if you read in the book, he talks about how he was able to tap the powers from the different visions by performing them on Earth. And he talks of the time when he no longer knew what to do. He came to a certain point in his life, and he didn't know what to do next. So by then, we were put on reservations. So he contacted an old holy man named Few Tails, who was to help him. And I take it as the Few Tails family are from around Kyle, so that's probably where he contacted him and asked him to help him. So in the vision, in the book, it talks about how he went to an area near Grass Creek, which is west of Manderson, up in the hills. And that's still to this day a very isolated area on our reservation. And so what we strive for is isolation, which is virtually impossible to do now because of the I guess distractions that we have to live with now, like cars and the sounds of cars and airplanes and jets going across the sky. But we recreate the isolation as close as we can to being alone. And so he went in that area west of the village and the community of Manderson, up in the hills. And if you read the book, he talks about how the Thunder people came and they tested him, and he was afraid, so he was crying. And he suddenly came to the realization that if he died, he would be better off in the other world. So in here, he said his fear left him after this. So he covered himself with his blanket or buffalo robe and prayed, and he said that there was even a gigantic hailstorm, but he said not one hailstone hit him. And so, and in the dream, if you read the book, in the dream, they showed him his next step, what he was supposed to do. So that's an example of how the Hanblecia is used when you don't have direction in your life, and you want to know from the spirit world what you should do next. So that's one of the reasons to go Hanblecia, vision quest. Um, that's the story of Black Elk. But if you read the book, it's more detailed, and he talks about how he worked his vision to help the people, and then he became a Catholic catechist at a certain point. And if you hear the story of the Catholics, they say that he gave up his practice as a medicine man, which isn't true, because he continued to practice clear up till close to the time he died. He just didn't want the Catholic Church to know, because he utilized them too, also for like survival, because they gave him a stipend and they gave him credit at the store in Manderson. So you got to remember, these were very hard times among our people. The late 1800s, early 1900s, clear into the 30s and 40s, there were people that actually starved to death from a lack of resources and food. Um, so that's the reason, that one of the reasons that people went on a Hanblecia. Uh, reasons for Hanblecia. So Oaye Humble, a dream to go seek a vision. So maybe you have a dream to go on a hill. That's how a lot of medicine men, holy men, became medicine men. Unless you're like Blackout, and how he got his was he took sick at the age of 12 and went into a coma. And this is when he traveled, and the spirits took him to the 6 directions of the universe and gave him power from each one. Or you might have a dream to journey to the hilltop and pray up there, and they'll show you, the spirit people will show you why they wanted you to come. So that's the Woy Humble, a dream to go and seek a vision. And then there's the Woki Chunze, a sacred promise and a fulfillment of a request. So maybe you have a relative that's really sick, maybe on their deathbed, and they made the vow. They said, if my relative lives, then I will suffer on the hill for them in place of their suffering. And if they get well, then um, you'll have to fulfill your promise. You can't fool, in our worldview, you cannot fool the outer world, or the higher powers, the spirits, because uh, there's dire consequences in that case too. Mm. And then Oaye, the seeking answers to your future, the role in life itself. Um, so that's the reason that Black Elk went on the vision quest when he was when we moved on to the reservations. Uh, and then another one is Igluwaste, to right what you feel is wrong, or if you're breaking a promise. So maybe you promised something to the spirit people and you didn't fulfill it. So in order to make it right, you go on a vision quest. Or maybe if you feel like you wronged somebody, so so you want to make it right with the spirit people, so you go on a vision quest to suffer. So we don't always go to seek power. A lot of it is to go to seek understanding. And even in modern times, like young people can go to see what is their life's journey going to be like. What is their life's work, not everybody is given visions like what was given to Black Elk or a lot of the holy men. Not very, in generations, when we have a generation of people, not everybody can be a holy man or a leader or anything like that in that sense. but you can go and maybe the grandfathers will show you what you're supposed to do in your life, how you're going to help the people. So it might not entail being a holy man or a medicine man or a person that carries power, but you might go to seek what you're supposed to do, and people might give you. People get the impression that you go just to seek power, but it's you go for understanding of your life's role, and you can go and pray for protection through your life too, because of the uncertainties of life. You never know, what is ahead of us. So um, a lot of the great chiefs or warriors in our time went for visions on the hill and got medicine to protect them and to help them, and that's how they became well known. Uh, so a lot of these famous warriors, including Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, will tell you that it was their vision that the spirit people, the higher power, gave them in order for them to achieve what they was able to do. So so that's an understanding for people that are planning to go, because people aren't meant to and aren't destined to see real powerful visions or dreams. Then uh, they become disheartened a lot of times. Uh, I've known people that said, I didn't see anything, I didn't have a dream. They seem kind of like disheartened and disappointed when they come down. And so I tell them, I said, no, I say, what you went for was to gain strength and walk a good life, walk a good path. I said, and I'm sure, and I know that the spirit people gave that to you. So I said, don't take it as you were a failure. I said, so the protocol is each holy man has is different in their ways. So how a holy man helps you, and the reason a holy man helps you, or a medicine man, or a Wakan Iyeska, interpreter of the sacred, or a Wichasha Wakan, a holy man, is he takes you is the reason that he helps you is that he has that ability to contact the outer world, and so he has his own protocol. So a lot of times I see people make the mistake of they'll go to one holy man and then he'll have a certain way, and then they'll go to another one, and when that holy man's protocol wasn't the same, then they kind of like they'll either question it or become disappointed or whatever. And it's not good to say, well, when I went over there and I fasted under so and so, he did it this way, and we did this. And then I have people showing up that want me to help them, and they'll have different things that I don't use in my protocol. So I asked him, I said, what is this for? And well, the last medicine man I went to, he required us to use this and have this. So all due respect to the person they went to before, I tell him that, no, this is a different way here. So we have to, I guess, follow that protocol. And that's a part of it, is that not all holy men are the same. Not all holy men use the same ways. Each holy man has his own wokage, and the wokage is what that man uses as his offerings. So it's different ways that they, according to their dream, according to their vision, or according to the instructions which they were given, we follow that. So he has his own offerings. So this is, if you're going underneath his, I guess, teaching, or underneath his direction, then you follow what he has. So don't go comparing the two or saying we did this over there or don't go and say, I think his way was the right way, and questioning the other person's way, because that's there's a reason why they do the things that they do the way they do. And then the hochoka, which is the altar in which you go and stand and make your offering. There's lots of differences on how you set the altar. So you go to a certain holy man and he said it a different way, but then you might go to a different one and he'll set it a different way. And again, that's according to their ways and their visions and their instructions. And each ichunzapi, so each ichunzapi in our language is the sacred vow that you make. How long you stand on the hill, you should decide that on your own. I had a man say, how long are you going to stand? And he said, well, I'll leave it up to the spirits. So the spirit said, okay, you'll stand 7 days. So he was real quiet and he said, can I go 4? So the spirit people said, yes, you can go 4. We were just testing you to see if you were sincere in what you're saying. So don't leave it up to them to make the each ichunzapi or the walk ichunza. Don't leave it up to them. Do it according to your way. What can you do? What can you handle? So I've heard people say you have to go 4 days. But there's no rule that says you have to. You can go overnight, maybe overnight and finish the next day, or you can go 2 days or 2 nights. If you can go 4 nights, then that's good too. If somebody wants to go 4 nights and 4 days, I'm not going to discourage them, but I make sure that they know how hard that is, the severity of standing 4 days and nights without food and water. That's hard to do. And when you're up there on that hill alone, it's just you with your pipe and, of course, the spirit people. But you learn a lot about yourself, who you are up there. So I always tell the story that when I went on my first vision quest, I was 23 years old. And I stayed up there 3 days and 3 nights. And the first night, as I sat there, all these memories came back to me from the growing up in an alcoholic family and growing up as a little boy, a lot of times being left, coming home from school and the parents are gone. So you kind of scrounge for what food you can get, and you go to bed. Sometimes my brother would beat her, but sometimes he'll go out and be with his friends. So I'll be home alone by myself sometimes because my sisters are already married and gone. So imagine a 7, 8-year-old boy by himself like that. And then I would wake up to a bunch of people talking and laughing and loud music, sometimes fights. So that trauma I seen growing up, I didn't know I was carrying that within myself till I went on a hill. And suddenly all these dreams came flooding back into my memory. So I stood up with my pipe and I started to cry, and I couldn't hold the tears back. So something told me to walk in a circle. So I walked in a circle praying and crying. And I did that the whole night. And I know now that I needed to do that to heal from the trauma and to heal from the things that I went through as a child. So when I went into the next day, the daytime, then I felt a little bit better. I could feel a healing within myself. And I went through that day, and it was really, really hot. It was, I don't know what was, but it was over 100 degrees. And then I went into that second night, and then next a storm came and it split around me, but it rained on top of me, and I was laying there shivering and praying. And then the next day I woke up, and then it was the same way, that coldness and the humidity turned into heat. So I was really, really hot up there and humid, and I sweated and sweated, and I could tell I became dehydrated. And then that third night is when the spirit people approached me. So I realized now that I had to get rid of that trauma and heal from that trauma before the spirit people would approach me, because there was a lot of things in my mind and in my spirit that was blocking their ability to contact me or talk to me. So I had to heal first. So I never expected that. I never expected that I would have to do that, but I'm glad that I did now. So the teaching is, before a holy man takes you, there's a word in our language called watching sapa. So be attentive of everything around you. So this is the story of Grandfather Fool's Crow, who he told me himself when I was a young man. He said he went on he was orphaned at an early age, so his father raised him to a certain point. Then he had a stepmother come in. Uh, when he was 13 years old, um, he had a dream to go on a hill, and this certain man he seen in his dream, he didn't know who he was. And here he went to a gathering, a celebration of some type, and he saw this man. So he told his father, he said, I seen this man in a dream, and he took me on a vision quest because I'm supposed to do something in my life. I was told that. So his father approached this man with him. And this man, his name was Siinata, means stirrup, like stirrup on a saddle. Siinata is how you say that. So this man's name was Stirrup. So he approached him and he said, this man said, yes, I know him. He said, I seen him in my dream, and I was told in a dream that he will come seeking my help. So Fool's Crow was 14 years old at that time. So he said, prepare for 1 year and I will take you on the hill. So when he was 15, he went on the hill and he said, listen, because the spirit people will give you a song. So he stayed up there at a very young age. He stayed first time 2 days and nights. He said he waited for the song and it never came. So he said, and he says it never came at the time. So he came down and he told off the hill, and when he went into the sweat lodge with Siinata stirrup, uh, he told him, I didn't hear a song. So the spirit people that worked with Siinata said, no, we sang it to him. It's just that he wasn't listening. So he said, get ready, nephew, and I'll take you again the next spring. So the next spring, he got ready all through the winter, the summer, and the winter. And then he went to Siinata's home, and he took Grandfather Fool's Crow into the sweat lodge, the Inipi, and then he put him on the hill. This time he took him for 3 days and nights. And he listened and listened all through the 3 days and nights, and nothing. He said, I heard nothing. So he came down and told the same thing to the holy man in the Inipi, in the sweat lodge. He said, Uncle, I didn't hear anything. So the spirits told him again, yes, you did, but you weren't listening. So he said, stir up. The Siinatan told him, I'll take you one more time, but this is the last time. If you don't get the song by now, then you might as well give up. So he went this time 4 days and nights, and he was 16 years old, almost 17 years old. So he went up 4 days and nights, and on the fourth night, that morning was going to be when stirrup comes to get him. So past midnight, sometimes he said, he was lying there, and it seemed more and more that he wasn't going to hear the song. So he laid there, and he said tears came to his eyes, and he was crying because he wanted to, whatever it was they were going to give him, he wanted to attain it, achieve it, so he could help the people. So he laid there and he went to sleep. And here, as he was sleeping, he heard a singing through the trees, the sound they make when they go through, the sound of the wind it makes when it goes through the pine tree. And that sound like that was the singing. And so he woke up, and here he could still hear it, but it was no longer the sound of the wind through the pine trees. It was an actual man singing. So that's how he came down, and he started to sing with the song, and he learned it right there after he repeatedly sang it several times. He came down and told Siinat, the holy man Stirrup, that he heard the song. So the holy man said, yes. He said, the first time you went, they sang it to you through the trees, but you didn't catch it because you were waiting for a voice to sing the song to you. He said, but the song was always there each time you went. So the song that he learned on that hill is the song that he uses to call the spirit people. And he sang the song for me. And I know the song, but I never sing it because that's his song. And I wasn't given the right to sing that song. So that's an example of how a lot of times the spirit people give us messages around us, but because we're not attuned to it, we don't hear it, we don't see it. They show us things. They show us. They even show themselves to us, but we don't see them because we're not paying attention. Even today, we're even missing more because, especially the young people, because when you see them, they're all staring at their phones. So if the spirit people want to show us something, they're missing it because they're too busy staring at their phones. So they're missing a lot. So this is an example of how the spirits were communicating with Grandfather Foolscrow, and how he got the song he needed to contact the spirits and bring them. And then through the spirits, they did the healing of the people. So he said, if I listened or knew to listen the right way, he said, I would have heard it the first time. But because I was listening for a voice to sing to me, then that's why I was missing it. So there's different stories of the holy men when they go on vision quests of what they experience. There's a holy man that lived in the early part of the 1900s in Oglala, and his name was Nose. Kasu, his name was. And his vision, he told my mother, who was in the UEP ceremony with him, his vision was he stood in the hills for 4 days and nights, and this man came to him, and this man was dressed in a suit coat and a top hat, he said, and he gave him instructions on how to heal people. And he said, as you go and as you progress, he said, you will gain more and more visions, but I'm the first to come to give you your instructions, he said. So this is what you're gonna do, he said, and he gave him his instruction. And he said that as he stood there looking at this man, he said he got smaller, 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 till he came to the ground, and he was what you would call in our language and those of you that understand Lakota, they're called Unkchepagamia. But the white man, the Washichus, call them a dung beetle. So you see them on the ground, and their hind end is kind of high, and they walk like that. Their front legs are shorter and their back legs are long. So this dung beetle turned into a man and gave him his instructions. So after he followed the instructions of this dung beetle, he got more and more visions and more power came to him. So in his day, when he helped people, there's stories of him of how powerful of a medicine man that he was, and that there's a story of how this girl got bucked off a horse and she hit her head and she died. Her brain swelled up. And so he had a ceremony and they took her into the Uipi ceremony and he brought her back to life. He saved her life. So this is how powerful he was. So I guess when you go on a vision quest, then you have to be watching sapa, like the word says you. And that means to be attentive of everything around you. And that's one of the examples was the story of grandfather Fool's Crow. So we know that people make the mistake of wanting to go and see a vision, but that's not really the purpose of it. It is a vision quest, but people want to see these fantastic visions and like this, and that's not how it is. It's if you're fortunate to have a vision, then you're fortunate in life if it guides you throughout your life. But if you go up just to go up to pray and give thanks and pray about understanding, they say Wakan co-option, don't chase power, because if you was to chase it and attain it, but you wasn't meant to have it, some kind of misfortune can fall on you. Like a story that I was told by my uncle Earl Swift-Talk, who was a medicine man in the Sichango, among the Sichango people, the Rosebud people. And he told me the story one time about how this man kept seeking power and coming to him. So eventually in this ceremony, the spirits told him, give me 3 eagle tail feathers, bring them. And we'll tie medicine upon these feathers, and you will cut a cherry stick, and you will tie those eagle feathers on this staff, and then the spirit people will come to you and you will be able to help people. So he brought the 3 tail feathers to him, and so they had a ceremony and he tied these feathers to a staff, and then they sang. And here, when the lights were turned on, there was medicine tied on those feathers. So he said, tomorrow night, you'll set in this altar. You'll set in an altar. So he put up cross offerings and he put the staff up, and the one that the spirits tied the medicine on. And here the spirits came to this man and they talked to him. And they said, we gave you what you wanted, but now we're going to take our payment. So he didn't know what they meant. So he said the ceremony was over, and within a few days, he had 3 children. The oldest was a girl, the middle one was a boy, and the youngest was a girl. He said that oldest girl was running around playing, and then suddenly she fell down. And she didn't have a heartbeat. So they rushed her to the hospital, but she didn't survive. The following week, the middle one, the boy, went into a high fever and he went into convulsions, and then he died. And then the following week, the last little girl, he said, she started choking suddenly, and she hemorrhaged from the mouth. And before she got to the hospital, they said she, what they call Wayuskepa. She bled to death from a hemorrhage in her mouth. So he was crying, and he had a ceremony, and he put up the altar they gave him, and he prayed, and he said, why did this happen here? They said, the feather represented each one of your children. He said, so because you wanted power, even though you weren't supposed to have power, we took your 3 children and payment. So he said, this is not the way I wanted it. I wanted this power to help people. So they said, well, you have the power to help people now. But like we said before, that is the payment. So there was nothing he could do to reverse what happened. And so I guess he turned to drinking, and he drank himself to death because he couldn't live with what he experienced. And he turned against the practice that he was going to do. He decided not to do it anymore. So he just drank himself to death and died of cirrhosis. So that's an example of how people shouldn't ask for something that they're not meant to have. So this is my grandfather and his vision, his way humble. This is my grandfather, Mila Hanskat Kashunke. So this is my grandfather, American horse. So American horse, when he was 12 years old, he went into uh, a coma from a sickness. He had a high fever, and he went into a coma. And in his coma, he traveled to a star, a certain star. We call it Oaye in our language. And up there on that star were some bears that lived like humans. They lived in teepees, and they did everything that humans did. And so they took him to this teepee, and they showed him a way to doctor people using certain herbs that they showed him. And he used the eagle claw to deaden pain. So he was able to use this claw to extract like arrow wounds and bullet wounds. And he had medicines to numb if somebody got bucked off a horse and broke their leg, he had medicines to numb the entire leg. And then he would pull the leg back in place. Then he would use a dry, like a thick scraped buffalo hide, like a parfleche kind of hide, and then he used that to put the leg back in place. And it was, you could lace it up and tighten it so that you could hold the leg in place. And he healed a lot of injuries like that. And he extracted bullets out of wounded men that would have died otherwise. Um, so he had power to heal in that way, and his vision was given to him through the bear people that took him to that star. So whenever the spirits brought him back to that teepee, he said he saw the earth way down there, way down there, like it just vanished. He said, and here when he was coming back, he was flying down to earth, and the earth got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then he went into the top of the teepee of where he lived. And he said at the top of the teepee he stopped and he looked down, and here he saw himself laying there. So he went back into his body, and he came to, and there was a medicine man working on him. At the time he was fanning him with a fan, and he was praying. So when he came to, uh, the people all praised that medicine man for saving his life. But he said, I knew it was the bear people that saved my life. He said, that took me to that star. So they gave him 4 types of medicine and a song for each one of those medicines. And throughout his life, he had the ability to communicate with bears in his dream. They would foretell things that were going to happen, even in his own life. So through this power that he got as a young age, he also became a well-known warrior. Uh, and he was a leader of the people clear into the reservation times. And surprisingly, um, he went and testified after the aftermath of the 1890 Wounded Knee Massacre. He went with his sons and some of his warriors, and they rode among the battlefield, or the massacre field, or the killing fields, you could say. And they found a little baby, so they took her back to Pine Ridge. And later on, a book was written about this baby when she grew up, and her name was Lost Bird. So they brought her body back to Wounded Knee and reburied her again. But it was him and his sons and his warriors that found the little baby's body. So he went before Congress uh, and testified on behalf of the Lakota people, and he testified on behalf of the people that were killed there, and how the wrongs that were done to our people. And at that time, one of the scenes was that they rescind the 24 medals of honor that was given to the soldiers there. He wanted them to rescind that because he said that they didn't deserve those medals, because they disarmed his people first before they started shooting at them and firing on them. So he said, so it's kind of anybody that's like, including my father, spoke about this. That's a slap in the face of any American that served in the armed forces in any war. So that's more medals were given at Wounded Knee than any other battle in history. So battles like D-Day, Normandy, invasion, the ones that fought, like my father at Omaha Beach. My father fought at the Battle of the Bulge against the Germans, and and those were really terrific battles that they fought against the German people. And no, and that many, like at the Battle of the Bulge, I think there was 3 or 4 Congressional Medals of Honor given. And here, these are the victims of this massacre were women and children and unarmed people. So that is a slap in the face to any person that's ever served in the armed forces. That's a slap in the face to them, because there's a lot of men that fought, that my father talked about in World War II, that should have got a Congressional Medal of Honor for bravery, but never got it. Yet these soldiers got one for killing innocent women and children. So in his testimony, he wanted the United States Congress to rescind those medals, which to this day, we're still trying to achieve that. There's bills in Congress that to ask the Congress to rescind those medals, but it goes nowhere. It falls on deaf ears, as they say. So this is the story of Tatanka Iotake. So you see to the right, the Deer Medicine Rocks. This place is about, I'd say, roughly 15 to 20 miles, maybe north of the town of Lame Deer, Montana. This is where you're looking from the east towards the west. This is where Deer Medicine Rocks are. The spirits engrave onto these rocks the future of what is going to happen to the people. So right east of there, where the highway runs now, was the Sundance Lodge, where grandfather Sitting Bull saw his vision. And according to the elderly gentleman who takes care of the place, who recently passed away about 2 or 3 years ago, his son now takes care of the place. So this place is on private land. So, and a rancher will allow you to go there and visit it. But the Sundance Lodge was to the east, where the highway runs towards the east there across. And right, maybe a mile up the road is the boundary of the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. That's where their boundary ends. So you go on out, you leave the reservation there, and the next town up is a town called Cold Strip. So this is where Sitting Bull had his Sundance. And according to Jack Bailey, the elderly gentleman that lived there, that Sundance Lodge stood till the 1940s. And then they took it down so that they could build a highway through there. They changed the course of the highway. So somehow this Washicha man knows a lot of history of our people. And he actually seen the Sundance Lodge where Sitting Bull saw the vision of the soldiers falling into camp. So their Sundance was relatively, in the today's standards, was held early. They brought their tree on the 3rd, they built their lodge on the 4th, and they started dancing that evening. So that was on June 4th. So that's usually Sundance is now run from maybe late June on to into the early or middle August, but they had their Sundance really early. If you think about it, the first week in June. So the Sundance Lodge is where he danced. He gave 100 pieces of flesh from each arm. Then he danced nonstop all night, all through the next morning. And around when the sun just passed the middle of the sky, he fell and he saw that vision and of the soldiers falling into camp. So he continued. Oh, he stopped dancing, but there was some more men that continued dancing, and then they went into the noon of the next day. Then the Sundance ended. So surprisingly, there was only uh, uh, Short Bull tells the story of the Sundance in Lakota. If you ever get a chance to read it, he said that there was only 16 dancers out of that camp was covered this whole valley here. It's called right below, right to the east of these Deer Medicine Rocks uh, is the Rosebud River or Rosebud Creek. So that valley is full of wild roses, and so that's how the name Rosebud Creek came about. So there was like thousands of people there, but only 16 dancers danced. And the reasons for that is the severity of the sacrifice. They pierced really deep, and they started dancing. Soon as the Sundance start, they try to break loose. Soon as you break loose, you're done Sundance. So they take you to the Inipi, and you have a Inipi, then you're done. So that's why the fire burns through the Sundance, because you never know when someone finishes. So Sitting Bull was the third to the last dancer. Two more dancers danced into the next day and finished. But of the 16, those were the last two that got done piercing. So this place, Deer Medicine Rocks, we have a different name for it. That's the name that I don't know who gave that name to it, but we call it Igruga Kachlog Wayankapi. So Igruga is the cluster of rocks that you see. Kachlog is Wayankapi, is to see through it. So this man who was taught the stories, this Jack Bailey, these Washichus, he knows the story of these places probably more so than a lot of natives. He learned from the Lakotas and he learned from the Cheyennes. And when I went there, he went with me, and I went with my adopted sons, to one of them, which is on this presentation here. And I went to look for that place because I heard about it. where that crack in a rock is, where the sun shines through it at a certain time of the year. So my grandfather, I went there. He told me to look for that when I go there. My grandfather, Thomas American Horse. So I went to look for that. In here, he said, this Washichu said, "You're a real medicine man. You're a medicine man, aren't you?" So I said, "Yes." He said, "You're a real one." He said, "Because the real ones know where to go and where to look." He said, and I've had men come here that say they're medicine men, but they don't even know about that certain place on the rock. He said. So somehow he knows who's real and who isn't just by his knowledge. So so on this rock is the prophecies of our people, and towards the left, looking at this rock to the right. So we're facing west. To the right of this rock, right on the top there, there's blue where the lightning struck, then left a blue wide mark on this rock. The Thunder people painted it blue. So the Thunder people, the Thunder Dreamers, go there and they touch that blue mark with their chanupas, their sacred pipes. That's how they bless their sacred pipes. So that's there. And then it shows everything. So you look at this rock, you'll move to your left as you look at it. All the way around the corner, the prophecy of our young people taking their own lives is on that rock. You have to know how to read the rock to understand what it is, because the spirits write in symbols. So off to the left of this, out of the picture, you can't see it. There's a large rock that's an owl, and on that rock, Crazy Horse at this Sundance, he saw the how he was going to be killed and how he was going to be murdered. And so it's on that rock. It shows that soldier stabbing him in the back. And then there's a man who they thought was a preacher, a man dressed in black with a black hat and a beard. They thought it was a preacher that was in that drawing, or that what's etched in the rock. And it's a man. And here they found out in history later after he died was it was the physician that worked there at Fort Robinson in Nebraska, where he was killed. And this man's name was Valentine McKilligutty. That was who was the spirits were showing was going to be there when he was killed. So so it wasn't a preacher. And so, but the whole you can see the assassination of him on that rock where that owl is. So he saw it in 1876. So he knew that he was going to be assassinated before it even happened to him. So this is the vision where this is the place where Hankashila Tathanka Iotaka had his dream of the sun. So that's the story of Hanblecia.
Wopula. Thank you for your generous teachings and the way you extend yourself to everyone. Thank you for that, Lekshi.
So we'll have a closing prayer with Chingsi Jo Gaigo.